The plane had just begun to taxi down the runway when Rachel Morgan leaned back into her seat, eyes fixed on the window, but seeing nothing. Outside, the world was a blur of silver wings and wet pavement, but inside her chest, it was heavier than the cargo hold beneath her. Only hours ago, she had been standing in the biting wind of a foreign military base. She could still smell the faint trace of gunpowder in the air from the 21-gun salute. The sound of the final shots still echoed in her ears, sharp, deliberate final. The folded American flag pressed into her hands had felt cold and stiff, as though it carried not just her husband's memory, but the weight of every promise the world had failed to keep. They had been married for years, though most of those years were lived apart. Deployments didn't care about anniversaries, birthdays, or holidays. And love, true love, didn't keep score. She never counted the missed dinners or the empty chairs at family gatherings, but now she could count the days since she had last heard his voice, and that number would never change again. Rachel's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. She wasn't the type to send desperate pleas or dramatic words. This wasn't going to be a flood of messages, emojis, or exclamation marks. It would be simple. It would be clear. She opened the family group chat, the same chat that had once been filled with baby pictures, holiday greetings, and random jokes. Without overthinking, she typed, "Flight lands at 3 p.m. Can someone pick me up?" 7 words. No explanation, no mention of the funeral, the folded flag, or the miles she'd traveled alone. Just a quiet request, a small lifeline tossed out into what she hoped was still a sea of family. She hit send. The tiny paper airplane icon shot across her screen, delivering her words into a space she had always assumed was safe. Then she slipped the phone face down onto her lap and stared out at the clouds gathering in the distance. The seatbelt light was still on when her phone buzzed. Rachel picked it up almost too quickly, hoping against reason for warmth on the other end. The screen lit up with a single line from her brother. "Busy. Try Uber." 2 seconds. That was all it took to type. 2 seconds to dismiss the miles she had traveled alone, the ceremony she had just endured, the reality that her husband's body was somewhere far away from where he had taken his last breath. She swallowed, forcing herself to stare at the words until they blurred. Then another notification slid across the screen. This time it was her mother. "Why didn't you plan better?" "No." "How was the funeral?" "No." "We're proud of him." Not even, "I'm sorry." Just 2 lines, cold, fast, and clean. Words that didn't carry the weight of love, but the sharpness of indifference. Rachel slowly placed the phone back on her lap, the hum of the engines suddenly louder in her ears. Outside the window, the clouds stretched endlessly, but for the first time, she felt as though she was falling through them. In that moment, the grief doubled. She had lost her husband, and she realized she no longer had a place called home to return to. The cabin door hissed open with a rush of recycled air, and the passengers began to spill into the jet bridge like water breaking through a dam. Laughter echoed, hugs waited just beyond the glass. Rachel stepped out slowly, the folded triangle of the flag still pressed tightly against her chest. The strap of her bag dug into her shoulder, but she hardly noticed. Inside the terminal, the scene unfolded like a movie she didn't belong to. Families collided into embraces. Children squealed at the sight of parents returning home. The air smelled faintly of coffee from a nearby kiosk, and overhead, the crackling voice of an announcer called out connecting flights. She moved past the baggage carousel, its metal surface gliding with suitcases, bright colors, vacation tags, ordinary life. Her footsteps seemed louder in her own ears, the wheels of her carry-on ticking rhythmically against the tile floor. No one was there for her. No hand lifted to wave, no familiar face craning above the crowd, just the endless shuffle of strangers rushing into arms that were waiting for them. Rachel kept walking, her posture straight, her grip on the flag unbroken. The sliding glass doors whispered open, letting in a rush of cool outside air, mixed with the faint smell of jet fuel. Rachel's eyes adjusted to the daylight beyond the terminal, and then she saw it. A black SUV, polished to a mirror shine, sat parked at the curb. Not idling impatiently like a rideshare, but waiting deliberate, still, and unmistakably for her. Beside it stood 3 figures, 2 women, 1 man, all in full military dress uniform, pressed jackets, gleaming buttons, ribbons pinned with precision. Their posture was flawless, shoulders squared, chins lifted, like a wall of honor between her and the world. They didn't wave or call out. They simply stood, watching her approach, the solemnity in their faces, telling her everything she needed to know. They were not her family by blood, but in that moment, they were exactly the people who showed up when she needed someone most. That night, the story broke during the evening news primetime, right after the weather report and just before sports. The screen faded into a shot outside the airport. Rachel Morgan, in a black coat, stepped through the sliding doors, the folded triangle of the American flag held firmly against her chest. Behind her, 3 Marines in full dress uniform stood in formation, their presence as steady as stone. There was no smile, no visible tremor in her hands. Her face was calm, not empty, but contained, as if every emotion had been folded away as neatly as the flag she carried. She didn't speak to the camera. She didn't glance at the reporters who stood back unsure whether to approach. The moment was already complete without words. The anchor's voice, smooth and measured, narrated over the footage. Today, a widow returned from her husband's overseas military burial. She arrived alone, but not unnoticed. The camera cut to a close-up, a single sheet of paper, the handwriting neat, steady, deliberate. Across the white page in dark ink, Rachel's words were written, "If you ever find yourself standing alone at the edge of grief, don't look for the ones who left you. Look for the ones who show up anyway." No signature, just the initials RM. It didn't need a full name. Everyone who mattered already knew. Within hours of the broadcast, screenshots of that note began to appear online. Twitter feeds, Facebook timelines, Instagram stories, all flooded with the same image. People shared it with captions like, "This hit hard," "Read this twice," or simply, "Truth." It wasn't just a quote. It was a mirror forcing people to ask themselves which side of the sentence they were on, the ones who leave or the ones who show up. The restaurant was bathed in golden light, the kind that made crystal glasses sparkle and polished cutlery gleam. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved like a quiet tide between tables, delivering plates of seared salmon and champagne flutes filled to the brim. The air was warm, fragrant with rosemary and roasted garlic. At the center table sat Amanda, perfect hair, perfect smile, the kind of presence that drew every gaze in the room. Around her, laughter rippled like champagne bubbles. A banner above the table read in swirling gold letters, "Congratulations, Amanda." Every toast clinked a little louder than the last. The sound of forks against plates blended with bursts of applause. This was her night, her stage, her spotlight. Jessica stood near the entrance, just far enough away to be part of the scene, but not of it. No one had saved her a seat. No one noticed she was still wearing the same coat she'd had on all day. The glow of the chandeliers didn't reach her. In a room full of warmth, she felt the chill of being invisible. It started quietly, just a ping on her phone one morning. Rachel opened Facebook and saw her mother's latest post, an old photo faded with time of Rachel and her brother, no more than 8 years old, holding hands at a 4th of July parade. The caption, written in cheerful capital letters, read, "Family above all, always." It might have fooled strangers. It might have painted the picture of a tight-knit family that had always been there for each other. But the internet has a way of peeling back paint. The first comment from someone Rachel barely knew cut straight through the illusion. "You didn't even pick her up from the airport." The thread lit up after that. Shares, comments, quiet outrage from people who still believed loyalty was a two-way street. Her mother didn't reply. The post stayed up, but the shine was gone. Then came a text from her brother. Just one line. Didn't realize it was that serious. Rachel read it twice, a humorless laugh escaping her lips, as if grief came with a calendar invite, as if burying your husband overseas was something you needed to warn people about in advance. Rachel's thumb hovered over the send button. The room around her felt suddenly too small, the air too heavy. For years, she had carried the weight of absence, the missing calls, the empty chairs, the unspoken apologies. But now, she wasn't just carrying grief, she was carrying betrayal. Her brother's words, so casual and dismissive, echoed in her mind. Didn't realize it was that serious. As if pain came with an RSVP, as if sorrow was something you could schedule. But grief is never on time, and healing doesn't ask for permission. With a steady breath, Rachel typed her reply. Not a scream, not a plea, not a demand. Just a simple truth, stripped bare and heavy. You made your choice. So did I. 5 words, a sentence that closed a chapter and opened a new one. It was her way of saying, I'm done waiting for you to show up. She didn't add a period or an exclamation mark. There was no need to shout. The silence that followed was louder than any words could be. A quiet, cutting mirror reflecting back all the coldness, all the absence she had endured. She hit send, set the phone down, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The email arrived 2 days later. A local news station had seen the airport footage, the flag in her arms, the Marines at her side, the absence of anyone else, and they wanted her to tell her story. At first, Rachel hesitated. Speaking meant reopening wounds she'd just started to close. But silence, she realized, often protects the wrong people, and this time she wasn't going to let the wrong people own the narrative. The studio was quiet when she arrived. No flashing lights, no dramatic background music, just a camera, a microphone, and the anchor sitting across from her with calm, steady eyes. They began with simple questions. What happened when you landed? Rachel took a breath, letting the silence stretch before she answered. I buried my husband with honor, she said, voice steady, and I came home to silence. She told the truth without pointing fingers. She didn't name her mother or her brother. She didn't need to. Every person who had been there, whether physically or not, would know exactly who she was talking about. And then she said the line that would outlive the interview, the one that would be quoted, reposted, and printed on hundreds of social media feeds. Blood doesn't make someone family. Presence does. The anchor nodded, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, reverent, as if the whole room understood the weight of those words. The interview aired at 6. By 9, the quote was everywhere. Veterans groups reposted the clip with quiet reverence. Spouse support networks picked it up, adding helpline numbers and notes like, if you're landing alone tonight, DM us. Family readiness pages on old bases shared it across time zones. Gold Star forums pinned her words to the top of their feeds. It didn't feel like fame. It felt like recognition. Comments rolled in beneath the video, not loud, steady. Lost my husband in Kandahar. Your sentence, it held me together tonight. My dad never came home. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. Presence is how we rebuild. I'm here. Then the messages shifted from sympathy to action. I can drive airport runs on weekends. I'm a caterer, happy to cover hot meals for new arrivals. I work at the airline. I can help coordinate gate escorts. I have extra car seats and blankets. Where should I drop them? The next morning, the mail carrier arrived with a plastic bin instead of a bundle. Handwritten envelopes, careful cursive, stamps from places she'd never been. Inside letters, prayer cards, photos tucked into folded paper towels, a challenge coin from a Marine she'd never met, a unit patch, a tiny bracelet braided from paracord with a note, for strength you can touch. The porch filled with flowers, not the grand glittering kind, sunflowers in mason jars, white lilies with a post-it that read, "We showed up today." A neighbor set down a casserole and rang the bell twice, then left before Rachel could open the door. A rideshare driver dropped off a bouquet with a receipt that said, "Paid forward." Her phone buzzed with DMs from strangers asking for nothing, but giving everything: time, miles, muscle, listening. She started a simple spreadsheet to keep track, then another, then a color-coded map of people willing to help within 30 miles of major airports. The living room became a sorting room, envelopes stacked by region, notes clipped to requests, names grouped under the word that had carried her this far: presence. At night, Rachel sat on the floor, letters spread around her like a paper constellation. She read until the words blurred, until the ache in her chest eased into something sturdier. Not closure, company. One thought kept returning clear as the line that started it all. If people are ready to show up, what would happen if we organized the showing up? The answer would become a movement. It began on a kitchen table with a legal pad, a dull pencil, and a question that wouldn't let go. If people are ready to show up, how do we make showing up inevitable? Rachel drew 3 boxes and gave them names that felt like anchors: gate team, meet at the jet bridge or arrivals; carry bags, hold space; curbside team rides home, warm coats; bottled water, a quiet playlist for the drive; home team meals, light cleaning, childcare check-ins for the first 2 weeks. She posted a simple sign-up link and a 1-page How We Show Up guide: trauma-informed language, no photos without consent, ask before doing, and the one rule written in bold: presence over performance. No grand gestures, just consistency. Within hours, the spreadsheet outgrew the screen. Volunteers mapped themselves by airport code: BOS, ORD, DFW, LAX, JFK. Next to each name, notes appeared: SUV can lift heavy, RN, comfortable with grief, bilingual Spanish-English, former Marine, will stand in uniform if requested. A retired teacher offered to organize meal trains. A flight attendant volunteered to walk new widows from gate to curb on her layovers. A barista promised coffee cards with little hearts drawn on the sleeves. The first welcome happened at JFK on a gray Thursday morning. The arrivals board glowed blue. People in mismatched jackets gathered near Terminal 4 with a hand-painted sign that said, "We've got you." The letters weren't perfect. The paint had smudged where someone cried while it dried. When the sliding doors opened, a young woman stepped out, eyes red, scarf too thin for the wind. No camera flashes. No speeches, just movement. A gate team volunteer took her carry-on. A curbside driver opened the door of a clean, warm car. Someone slipped a small card into her palm with 3 numbers: rides, meals, check-ins. No pressure to talk, no questions she didn't want to answer. Only this: you don't have to do the next 20 steps. You only have to do the next one. We'll walk beside you. A bystander, not part of the team, snapped a single photo from far back. The sign, the small circle forming around her, the way shoulders shifted to make space. That photo made it to a neighborhood Facebook group, then to a veterans forum, then to a city paper's weekend roundup. By sundown, it had crossed time zones. In 2 weeks, 5 states had active teams. The Slack channels multiplied by airport code. Rachel watched the map fill pins clustering near hubs, lines tracing rides taken, little check marks whenever a meal arrived on time. The system wasn't fancy, color-coded sheets and shared calendars, but it was alive. Messages began sounding different, less like emergencies, more like choreography. ATL Gate Team wheels down 1432. Curbside, you're up in 10. Meal train confirmed through Friday. Soups labeled with allergens. 2-week check-in scheduled. Reminder, no advice unless asked. Rachel refused interviews that tried to make her the center. "This is not a story about me," she said. "It's a story about what happens when presence becomes a plan." The "We've got you" photo from JFK kept circling back, returning like a tide. People zoomed in on the details: the chipped blue nail polish on the volunteer holding the sign, the spare pair of gloves tucked into a back pocket, the way one Marine, invited by the widow, stood slightly behind, eyes soft, posture steady. It wasn't spectacle, it was logistics drenched in love. And with every welcome, the promise got truer. You may land alone, but you won't walk out that way. The voicemail arrived at 7:41 p.m., a small red dot on her screen between a meal train update and a gate team check-in. Rachel pressed play. There was a breath, then her mother's voice, careful, trembling around the edges. "I didn't know how to help," the message began. "I didn't think you'd want us there. I didn't know what to do." In the background, a TV murmured and a glass clinked against a counter. For a long moment after the beep, Rachel held the phone to her ear, listening to the silence that followed, as if it might offer more than the words. She didn't press call back, not out of anger, but because the shape of her life had changed. Help, to her, no longer sounded like explanation. It sounded like showing up on time without being asked, with both hands free. The next day, an email notification popped up from the donation platform. A gift has been made to the Welcome Project. The donor chose to remain anonymous, but Rachel recognized the amount, a round number, with a pattern only her family would use. No note, no name, just a receipt and a checkbox that read, "In honor of," left blank. She closed the tab gently. She didn't need to decode it. Guilt has a signature even when it hides. She walked back to the living room where volunteers were sorting care kits, hand warmers, tissue packs, small notebooks for the things grief makes you forget. A teenager asked where to stack the blankets. Someone laughed at a joke about labeling soup. The house carried a new sound, ordinary kindness, moving like a current. Rachel slipped her phone into a drawer and returned to the table. She wasn't refusing her family. She was refusing to be pulled back into a story that asked her to explain why she needed what they didn't give. No reply was the boundary, and the boundary was peace. She wrote 2 emails before bed, one to confirm a JFK pickup at 9 a.m., and one to thank a stranger in Wichita for coordinating a week of breakfasts for a widow who hated cooking alone. Presence over performance, that was the rule. She kept it for others, she kept it for herself. The park was lit by candles, small flames trembling in the evening wind, a soft constellation across the lawn. Rows of folding chairs faced a modest stage, no spotlight. Just a wooden podium, a single microphone, and the hush that happens when people gather for something bigger than themselves. Rachel stepped up, fingers grazing the edge of the podium. She could feel the grain of the wood under her palm, solid and steady. Down front, a gate team volunteer held the "We've got you" sign low against her knees. 2 Marines stood at the back, not as spectacle, but as steady anchors in dress blues. Somewhere in the crowd, a child's whisper stilled. The mic cracked once, then cleared. She took a breath. "When my husband was alive," she began, voice low but sure, "he told me something I didn't understand until I had to live it." She let the quiet gather, let the wind move through the trees, let the candles blink like patient stars. "If something ever happens to me," Rachel said, each word measured, "don't let silence win." The line landed like a bell, clear, resonant, impossible to ignore. Heads bowed. Hands tightened around candle cups. A woman in the 3rd row pressed a folded tissue to her lips. Rachel's gaze moved gently across the faces. Mothers, spouses, friends, neighbors, the newly grieving, the long grieving, the ones who came because presence is what they had to give. She didn't name names. She didn't point toward absence. She pointed toward what held. "Silence takes," she said. "Presence returns. You showed me that, and we will keep showing up for the next person who lands alone." For a heartbeat, the park was utterly still. Then one person rose. then another, then the whole crowd, chairs scraping, candles lifting, stood to their feet. The applause began softly, as if afraid to break the moment, and then it swelled, warm and full, folding Rachel into something larger than pain. She did not bow. She didn't reach for tears. She simply set her hand over the folded flag at the corner of the podium and nodded once, as if answering a promise made long ago. The clapping went on not to celebrate an ending, but to bless a beginning. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She looked at the candles, at the faces shining in their light, and gave them the sentence that had carried her from the tarmac to this moment. You don't rebuild by waiting for them. You rebuild by becoming what they weren't. No drum roll, no swelling music, just truth, clean and steady. Heads nodded, some eyes closed, the words landed, then rooted. Cut to morning light. An arrivals board flickers. Wheels touch down, doors slide open. Rachel stands at the edge of the crowd with a small sign tucked under her arm, "We've got you." A woman steps out, coat too thin, eyes swollen from a night flight and a long week. Rachel moves first. She offers a quiet smile, a warm car, a thermos lid turned into a cup. No questions. She doesn't need to answer today. No forms, no cameras, just presence. A gate team volunteer takes the carry-on. A curbside driver opens the door. Someone from the home team texts, "Soup is on the porch. Allergens labeled. We'll check in tomorrow." Rachel places a card in the widow's palm, 3 numbers, 3 ways to breathe. "One step," she says softly. "That's all for today. We'll walk beside you." They start toward the exit, shoulders close, pace unhurried. Behind them, the sign is lifted high enough for the woman to see it once more before the sunlight takes over. "We've got you." The camera holds as the automatic doors open. No grand ending, no revenge, only the promise kept. Presence over performance. Again, and again, and again. Lesson to live by. Presence over performance. You don't rebuild by waiting for apologies or perfect timing. You rebuild by showing up for yourself and for others consistently, quietly, and with care. How to apply it this week. Choose presence over proof. Stop trying to convince people who don't show up. Invest in the ones who do. Build your Gate Curbside Home Circle. Ask 3 people for 3 roles. Gate, the person who answers on arrival. Curbside, the ride or practical help. Home, meals, check-ins for 2 weeks. Set boundaries, not battles. Replace long explanations with clear lines. This is what I need. This is what I'll do. Then act. If this story moved you, be part of the change. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes for more true soul-deep stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Comment with "I choose presence." Tell us one way you'll show up for someone this week. Share this video with one friend who needs to hear "We've got you."